This podcast is sponsored by BCH. BCH have been providing flats-specific reinstatement cost assessments for almost 20 years, with the building's insurance premium often contributing to a large portion of a service charge. BCH can provide specialist, third-party, unbiased, RICS-compliant reinstatement cost assessments, allowing the managing agent maximum compliance and best practice and the placement of the most competitive buildings insurance. Their commitment to accessible, prompt and accurate buildings insurance valuations has seen BCH secure the best first step in buildings insurance for over 600,000 flat owners. For a quote, please contact info@bch.uk.com today.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Four Walls, the podcast where I talk about the world of real estate and beyond. I'm your host, Jodie Fraser, and today I'm thrilled to have an amazing guest who's reshaping the landscape of residential property. Joining me is Susan Gregory, the visionary founder of Turner's Oak Estate Agents. Susan isn't just redefining what it means to be an estate agent, she's pioneering a people-centric, purpose-driven approach that caters to a unique and often overlooked demographic, older homeowners and their families. At Turner's Oak, they understand that moving in later life is more than just a transaction. It's a significant life transition. With transparency, empathy, and honesty, they guide their clients through the emotional and practical challenges of selling a cherished family home and navigating the complexities of starting anew. But Susan's influence extends beyond her agency. As an active member of Women in Residential Property, she's a powerful advocate for women in the industry. Recently, she launched a groundbreaking survey aimed at understanding and improving the experiences of working women in the residential sector. This initiative reflects her commitment to creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for women in real estate. And in this episode, we'll explore Susan's journey, her innovative approach at Turner's Oak, and her dedication to empowering women in the property sector. Welcome, Susan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jodie. Amazing to be here, and thank you for such a lovely introduction.
Of course, no problem. Can you just start by telling me a little bit about your journey to where you are now? What drove you to Turner's Oak and the industry in general?
Yeah, sure. So I was kind of late, I guess, to estate agency. I joined my first estate agency role at 26 on a management training programme down in Surrey. I'd had a few kind of previous careers before that, having left school at 16. Anyway, a term into my A-levels, I decided that it wasn't for me and did a few other bits and bobs and then joined estate agency because I've always been a people person, always loved working with people, but also really like being impactful. And when you're helping someone to buy, sell, move home, you create an impact, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So that's how I started an estate agency. And since then, some 16, 17 years ago, I've been a leader in kind of every type of estate agency you can imagine. So independents, large corporates, charity owned, property technology companies. I've kind of been there, seen there, done it all, and as you say, now founded my own version of what that could look like, hopefully bringing together some of the good and leaving behind some of the not so good, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely. So what drove you to focusing on the older homeowners demographic?
It's always been something that's been of interest to me. So I remember back when I was working at Curry's, when I left education, we were selling spin dryers. And you might remember spin dryers, kind of standalone dryers that older people tend to have in their home. And we sold these in branch. So you'd have to come in and collect them in the branch. And we had this woman who came in, she came on the bus, came to collect it in the branch, and she had no way of taking it home. It wasn't something that got delivered. It was just like, that was it. She wanted it, she had to take it home with her, and she simply couldn't. And she was quite kind of distressed by this. And I remember my manager kind of just saying, well, it is what it is. And for me, it just felt so illogical. It felt so cruel to some degree, so disempowering. So I did the kind of thing that I do, which is whack it in the back of my car and drive it around to her. And I've always just had that mentality of there's lots of ways that we have systems that don't serve those on the periphery. And one of the demographics that are on the periphery, and it's becoming more and more so, is those in later life. And I'll caveat that there's loads of amazing people in later life who are very much not on a periphery. But actually, as we move more into technology, as we move more into to those fast-paced ways of working, we are leaving behind a lot of older people. So it's always been of interest to me. When it came to kind of combining that with my estate agency experience, I'd seen through my thousands of property sales that I've overseen how if you are selling in later life, it is unique. It is more emotional, it is more stressful, it is more complex, things are harder. And actually, when you're then funneled into standard estate agency practices that really don't understand that, it adds to that stress and anxiety. And there's no choice about it. If you're going to sell, that's the way that you have to do it. And then I saw it when my mum moved home. And actually, I saw it more starkly when a family friend was widowed and she needed to sell. And I sat with her while she had her valuations just to support her. And I was just so disappointed and shocked how all three valuations all behaved exactly the same way towards her, talked about how they were amazing, how they were great, how they were going to do all these things, bamboozled her to death, and actually made her feel so overwhelmed at the process of moving. And it really disappointed me because they knew why she was moving, they knew why I was there, and they stuck to their scripts. And I got to a point of saying, well, if I don't think that's okay, then do something about it. Hence we have Turner's Oak.
Okay, so in terms of your approach then for dealing with the emotional challenges that come with selling a home in later life, and I say in later life, like my mum was widowed at 49. My dad passed away very suddenly. She didn't sell her home at that point. She decided no, she was going to stay, but she sold it, I think it was maybe 10 or so years later when she had to move in with my grandmother who had dementia. So there's emotional challenges around every scenario, isn't there? But specifically for people, as you say, who have been widowed, who are elderly, who might not have family around them. My mum had me to support her with things. My grandmother had both of us. You know, how do you approach the emotional challenges that come with moving?
Yeah, it's so important. And there's a couple of facets of that. So, and again, you kind of have to generalize, but everybody is different. When you think about the older population and the properties that they live in, 41% of older homeowners, so that's someone over the age of 65, has lived in their current home for over 30 years. So they haven't bought or sold a property for over 30 years, unless they happen to have a second home or something like that. If you think about that, we're kind of talking pre-Rightmove here. So the last time they did this thing, which is a massive thing, was pre all of the things that we now completely take for granted. Alongside that, you're actually potentially dealing with someone, as you say, who is widowed, who has never done something like this by themselves before. Again, stereotyping, if they're a widowed woman, they maybe haven't dealt with such big transactions before, finances before, etc. So all of that can be overwhelming. You then layer into that the reality that, again, if you've lived in your home for over 30, 40 years and are of a certain generation, that home is intrinsically linked to your identity. You know, if you were the homemaker, that is who you were. If you were the breadwinner, the bread was won for that home. It became status. It became all of those things. So the idea of success was to buy your semi-detached house, buy your detached house, pay off the mortgage. You had been successful in life. And actually letting all that go is a huge loss of who that person was. You're actually not just leaving your home, you're leaving that whole identity. Well, one of the things I'll say there is that is incredibly difficult to do, hence why most people don't do it. So we have a situation where we have lots of people staying in homes that maybe don't serve them as well as they used to, but the idea of moving is too much. And if you can start to understand why the idea of moving is too much, both from that practical, logistical perspective, but also the emotional perspective, you can start to actually approach it in a different way. You can help people unlock and accept and move forwards with that emotional journey. The other thing that you mentioned there with your scenarios was the fact that you were around for your mum and that you were both around for your grandma. And there's a whole emotional relationship there. You've got people, you're a very, very busy woman. So your mum has been a very, very busy woman. And the emotional stress on those family members, the sandwich generation as they're kind of known, who are trying to do best by that older relative, trying to support them, keep them empowered, help them make decisions, whilst also running their own lives, careers, family, household, is huge. So what we do is both understand what's going on for that older person who may well be alone and not have that support, but also understand what's going on for their support network and how can we show up, how can we act, how can we support them to go through this process in a way that just makes it that bit easier, that bit less stressful, where they can trust what we're saying, and know that actually, yes, it might be a bit choppy, it always is, but they're in safe hands.
We don't just rock up and have a look around the house and start putting labels and price tags on things. As you say, this is somebody's home. And I must admit, when I sold my house, it was an independent, it was run by two ladies, and it was such a stark contrast between them and a chain, which I won't mention, obviously. The guy who came in, who was part of the chain, was just sort of looking around and going, "Oh yeah, I can get rid of this for you for." I was like, actually, this has been my home for 8 years. It was my home before I met my husband. It was it was my safe haven, and you're calling it get rid of it. Yes, I do need to get rid of it in inverted commas in order to buy my new property, but there's a language around how you talk to people, isn't there? And I think that's really lovely how you've approached that with your work.
There's a language, there's an understanding, exactly as you say, you'd been there only 8 years, and you have a whole new future chapter coming, which is probably a positive move, which is why you're selling the home or why you sold the home. For a lot of people in later life, actually, it's not a positive chapter as far as they're concerned that they're moving to. It's a step backwards, it's a downgrade, it's all of these things. And you're leaving behind those memories of a loved one who might have passed away, all of those things. So having an understanding of that helps you to then, with a pragmatic lens as much as an empathetic lens, help people work through that. There are things that are going to have to be got rid of, as you say, but the language, the understanding you put behind that, the way that you conduct yourself around those things makes such a difference to people's ability to be able to do that. And that, for me, is the most important thing, and feel heard and listened and understood. In all of my experience of estate agency, and as I say, it's been through most of the models, actually under the surface, they're pretty much all exactly the same. We have a listings target, we have a viewings target, we have a viewings to sales ratio, we have all of these things. But actually, when you're dealing with somebody in later life, and to be fair, I think it should be for everybody, those metrics don't matter. It really is, how can I give you the best advice about your situation right now? How can I present your property in the right way for you right now? What are the right kind of viewings for you right now? What is the right kind of buyer for you right now? And stripping back all of those estate agency targets and systems that we've created, and actually saying, how do we help this person do this thing that they're doing?
Not just from the selling perspective. I presume people come to you as well in terms of buying their next property. So you kind of reverse engineer that a little bit, don't you? And just think, okay, so what is it you're going to need moving forward? Let's try and find you a property that has, not necessarily all older people are in wheelchairs or anything like that, but, it could be a bungalow because they can't handle stairs anymore. Or my mum, for example, she went from a house to a bungalow to look after my grandmother, but now she's decided in her late 60s, actually, there's no point in me going back to a house now my grandmother's passed away, because in 10 years' time, I'm probably going to have to move again. So she's kind of settling where she is, and but not everyone's got, as you say, got that approach or want to have that approach. My 95-ish-year-old great aunt is absolutely adamant she's not going anywhere, and you have to accommodate around her. And my grandmother's best friend, who's 95, exactly the same. No, I'm not moving. This is my home, and you have to accommodate around me, kind of thing. It's a hard subject, and I think you're doing really wonderful things with your estate agency, Susan. It's really, really great. But can you also tell me some common misconceptions about moving in later life?
Oh, that's
what your approach is towards that.
It's a really great question. I think there's quite a lot of misconceptions around from older people themselves around moving in later life, and there's quite a lot of misconceptions from those that are looking to support them. I was actually speaking to a lady yesterday, and she is 69, so she's trying to be future planning. She's trying to take control and keep control, if you like. But every time she kind of speaks to family about it, they say things like, "Oh, you always talk about moving, but you never do it." And that just is so dismissive for her. And because she doesn't think or act in the way that they want her to, which is basically, I want to do something, I'm therefore going to take the action, it's therefore done, which is what a lot of us in our midlife do. It's the way that we work. Everything is instant, everything is let's crack on with it, everything is like I'm time poor. We expect people to act the same way that we do. Actually, in later life, things are slower, considerations are more, and needing to feel heard and understood is massive. So I spent half an hour talking to this lady yesterday, and by the end of the half an hour, she had much more clarity. She felt heard and understood. She felt positive about what she might do. We didn't have any conclusions at all. I didn't really give her any information or advice, but she was able to speak and to talk. And I think one of the things where we really, if there's an industry, we could look at our practices. Imagine what it's like to register a buyer. We all get taught, if you're in the world of estate agency, about registering a buyer and all the forms we have to fill in. Imagine if you're in later life, slightly hard of hearing, you're ringing up because you have seen a property on the internet, because they are mostly very internet savvy. So they're on Rightmove, they are looking, but they want to get a little bit of information because they're not going to go and view straight away. Your process is to register them, get all of this information from them, take all of their personal details from them, understand their situation. That goes completely against where they're at when they're coming into that interaction with you, what they're looking for from that interaction with you. And it also goes completely against what they hear about their own security and scamming. And if you think about that for a second, one of the first things you do is ask someone to give you their address, their telephone number, their email address. And if they're watching Angela Rippon at 9:30 on a Monday morning, she's going to tell you, don't be doing that. So the thing that for me is so important is to build that rapport first, really listen to what someone's needing to say, wanting to say, their reasons for contacting you, reasons for speaking to you. And then once they've done that and they feel heard and trusted and understood, you can then have those details that you might need to get. So there's a whole misconception about actually the ability of people to move in later life, but that's because we expect them to do it in the way that we do it, and it's not that.
Yeah.
The second thing is people's own expectations about moving in later life. So we have expectations of retirement communities, we have expectations of care homes, we have expectations of all of these things. And actually most of those aren't true. I spend a lot of my time in care homes, retirement communities, etc. And they are incredible. But there are lots of things you need to know about them, and it can be very bamboozling in terms of service charges and management fees and all of these things. But actually 95% of older homeowners move into mainstream housing. So they move into an apartment, a downsize, a right size, whatever it might be. So it's not that people are moving into retirement communities, etc. Actually, they're just changing their environment.
Yeah, and as you say, there's nothing wrong with the retirement communities, but a lot of older people don't need to have a warden controlled place, or they don't need to have somebody on hand that, if they need to press something, they're not there yet. Yeah. And you can have a lot of that stuff installed in your own property anyway, and have that in the back of your mind when you're looking for something that actually in 10 years time, I might need to adapt X, Y, and Z, and that, this room would be perfect for that, or something, along those lines. But, it's just thinking empathetically and compassionately, isn't it, towards, your own self when you're looking for something, and then for you to help them through that journey. I really think it's incredible. Really, really great. We'll skip to women in residential property now, if that's okay. But what motivated you to become involved in the first place?
I got to a stage in my career, maybe 7-8 years ago, where I started to be aware of things like gender pay gap. I started to be aware of things like not seeing many senior women in leadership positions, and that is changing. We have our very own recent Alice Billard promoted to CEO of Nested. So lots of change there, but not enough. But back 7 years ago, it really did look very, very different. And I became very curious, and also I realised in myself that as a leader in estate agency, I was having to dumb down parts of myself. I was having to, and I was struggling with that. I was kind of having to play in the man's world that we were in. And when I talk about the man's world, it's the patriarchal systems, it is those more masculine ways of working, doing. And I come from a place of service. And as I think, is coming across in this conversation, how can we help people do the thing that they're trying to do? And if we do that well, we're going to get paid a decent amount for it. I kind of reverse engineer some of
Yeah.
And I'd seen so many times where we'd lose great women who were great service providers, who were having great rapport with clients, whose clients would come back to them time and time and time again, but just because they hadn't hit that one target, or just because they weren't showing up for certain events, or just because they'd had children, they could no longer sustain that work environment. And I actually prior to that, when I was 30, I got engaged and I was planning to have children. I didn't end up marrying that person or having those children. But not a bad thing.
That's a whole nother podcast.
But I actually left a state agency at that point. I was running a branch. I'm a career-focused person. And I just could not see how I could, back then, combine continuing my career with raising a family, etc. So I left state agency. I came back when I decided not to go down the other path. So it started to become I started to become aware that there was issues going on. And then I think the big catalyst for me was seeing on LinkedIn posts by one of our very, very big corporates, basically promoting 7 white men to their board. And I just was like, what is this? Why do you not see this as a problem? And by then I've been reading up about diversity and, as I say, gender pay gap, and the value of diversity, the value, the profitability of the more profitable diverse organisations are at diverse at leadership levels. And I just couldn't hold it in anymore. So I did this post on LinkedIn going, basically, what is this? Why do you not see this as a problem? And it blew up. It absolutely blew up. And it was fascinating, some people kind of going, my goodness, thanks for calling it out. Others going, what are you talking about? It's meritocracy, all of these kind of things. So that was kind of my start into it. But since then, becoming a committee member for work and actually really realising that there's a value in calling these things out. There's a value in being angry about some circumstances that we find ourselves in as women. And there's another value in actually, what are we doing to do something about it? Is it our responsibility? Is it not? What part do we play? And work is a combination of all of those things in terms of our purpose, our missions and our values. We're here to call things out, but we're here to do it with compassion, but also with purpose. Actually, why is this a problem? Why might it be impacting more than women? What can we do about it? Who do we need to help us do something about it? And why should it matter to all of us, not just women?
Completely agree with you. And it's one of the reasons why I got involved with women in residential property as well, because it's trying to find those like-minded individuals in order to then help push it forward without being called the names of bra burning and crazy feminist and expecting everyone to have hairy legs and armpits and stuff. It's just, we're not like that. It's fine. We might be. That's up to you. Do you know what I mean? And it's a bit like, until we are at the point of women being seen as equal, we have to keep doing these women only things, and we have to keep pushing that agenda. So tell me about this new survey you've launched and what you hope to achieve with it. Very exciting.
It's so exciting. So it comes from a few different places. It's a mixture of my personal experience, my professional experience, and then also a few years ago I did a master's in people and organisational development. That curiosity about how are we as organisations and why are we the way that we are, and what other options might there be, and what are these systems in which we operate that maybe we can't even see. And through part of that master's, we did research pieces. And so I learned how to conduct research. And it got to a point with conversations with the work committee where we were basically, again, maybe getting frustrated is the right word, that we weren't hearing women's voices. We weren't hearing them on platforms within the industry. We were having maybe derogatory comments or hearing about them anecdotally, people's experiences of derogatory comments, and then those comments or experiences being dismissed. I don't see it that way. I've not experienced that. I've never heard women say that to me. And all of that kind of underlies that kind of privilege, and you don't see the water that you swim in. So the survey is basically turning around and going, okay, well, let's collate the voices of women. Let's actually ask the questions in an anonymous survey as to what your experience as a woman in residential property has been, with no agenda as to what it might have been, with no leading questions, just a real clear ask as to what's your experience of this, what's your experience of X, Y, Z, whatever it might be, to then be able to turn around and say, right, now we have got a collective voice. And based on whatever comes out of that survey, which I've got some high level findings of already, we can then again do something about it. We can turn around to organisations and individuals, platforms within our industry and say, this is the experience of women. This is what they are concerned about. And here's a solution for it. Or here's a programme, a platform, a conversation we can now have about it. Because it's real. And that for me is the bit that was missing. We were not getting those voices. We were just getting anecdotal experiences talked about over a glass of wine. Oh, you've experienced that, me too, etc., etc. But when it comes to trying to affect change, you need raw data.
Data. I was about to say, and do you think those individuals who are very logical, very data driven, the white middle-aged men who have been promoted to the board of whatever, they will look at data and they will understand data. And they're not just going to be, oh, just women whinging kind of attitude. And we're not whinging, by the way. That's the impression that I get sometimes, that it's just like, oh, stop moaning. Like, why have we got to have this women-only agenda all the time? Well, actually, here's the data that proves why we've got to have it.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's exactly that. I think there's a few things there. I'll be honest and say there are some whose mindsets will never shift. And I actually have quite a lot of empathy with that. I have empathy for people who have been successful in the current system and they have made their own sacrifices, whether they're aware of it or not. And actually, you've got another pool of people saying, but your system isn't good and I don't like it, as far as they're concerned. That's their experience. And you've also got simultaneously the next generation coming through saying, I'm not prepared to work this way. And actually what that means for that senior person is they have to reconsider all the things that they did, because you're actually having other people shine a light and a mirror up to your ways of behaving. And that's a really difficult place to be. And some won't do it. They will just choose to maintain the narrative that they have. But I think a vast majority actually are willing and wanting to hear these experiences because they don't know them. They're not their experiences. They find it difficult to have conversations about them. They don't know what to ask. They don't want to ask the wrong question. That's as scary as anything else, and be misconstrued or whatever it might be. So being able to present this data, but alongside that, be able to say, this is why it matters, and this is why it matters for your organisation, and this is why it matters for our industry. It's so important. Our industry is over 50% women, and actually their experiences impact all of us.
Yeah, 100%. But how do you then balance your own mental well-being in the industry, your advocacy for supporting women, and your business? How do you manage all of that? Because as you quite rightly said earlier, like, women leave the industry because sometimes it just gets too much. We're not supported in certain ways, I've got a 5-year-old, and some days I think, how am I doing this? It's so difficult. I got sick myself a few years back from complete burnout. It nearly killed me, and I'm not exaggerating with that. So how do you, as a successful business owner, as well as all of the work that you're doing with women in residential property, how do you balance all of that and keep yourself well and healthy?
The immediate answer to that, and it's not as easy as that, is purpose. I do things that are purposeful, and purpose for me is empowering, and it kind of keeps me going. I actually can't now do work, find it very difficult to do work that isn't purposeful, and there's a privilege to that to some degree. I realise that that's a privileged position to be in, but actually if you have a purpose, if you understand the greater impact that what you're doing is having, it is energising in its own right, and it also gives you the boundaries to say, that's what I care about, and therefore that's where my energy is going to go. My business is incredibly purposeful. Women in residential property is incredibly purposeful. It's about something that's bigger than me. And I find that, as I say, very, very energizing and rewarding. So it has its own rewards. On a personal level, as I don't have children, so I don't know how people that have children do. And I'll be really honest about that. My own self-care is, it's gone by the wayside a few times. I think that happens. But I do a lot of yoga. I love hiking. The thing I love about hiking or getting out for really long walks is that after about 3 or 4 hours, I then start to have the thoughts that take that amount of time to come to the surface. And those are the really good thoughts. And you kind of go, where did that thought come from? And it's like when you have a really good conversation with your girlfriends or your partner or whatever it might be, if you're seeing them for an hour and the kids are all around, you have really surface level conversations and they're great, we'll take them, lovely, thank you. But actually, if you spend a weekend with your girlfriends or your partner without other distractions, the conversations that you have, the insights that you gain, the depth of relationship you get back to, is just so much more empowering and rich and nourishing. And you can have that with yourself. As I say, when I go on a long walk, I hear the parts of me that otherwise get drowned out by day-to-day noise.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. I mean, a sun lounger and a cocktail will do that for me as well. But, it's all good. It's all good. What advice would you give to women aspiring to enter our crazy industry?
My biggest thing I always say is I love this industry. As I say, I joined it having no qualifications. I had a successful, if you like, in inverted commas, career. And I think our industry is great for that. You can come in, you can make a success of yourself. It's diverse. There's so many opportunities. Every day is different, no matter what kind of part of residential property you're in. As a woman specifically, I think there's a whole part on being authentic. I think there's an opportunity now to be probably more authentic than there was when I first started, and I think that's a really, really great thing. But be aware that there are, systems and structures and systemic issues that will come and bite you potentially, and actually don't shy away from those, but don't be naive to them. And start to get great mentorship support groups around you and lean into those, because there is so much wisdom, experience, advice, but also from men. There are great male allies. Hold on to those as well. But also know when someone isn't on your side, and be confident enough to say, actually, this person isn't looking out for me or my career, and being able to walk away from those scenarios. As I say, that's an easy thing to say from a privileged position, but actually it's where you're going to get the most growth and the most satisfaction from the work that you're doing. But it's a wonderful industry to work in, full of wonderful people and with great opportunity. And there's, from everything from working with great organisations to being self-employed. There's such a vast breadth and depth of opportunity.
Before I let you go, and I'm sure you've got 100 years left in you to do the work that you're doing, but do you have an idea of the sort of the legacy that you hope to leave in your career or in the community that you look after? As I said, not that you're going anywhere.
You never know. Legacy is a great word, and actually it brings me back to working with those in later life and actually realising that legacy is important, whether you realise it or not, as you start to come towards the end of your life, whether it's your old age or anything else. How are you going to be remembered? It does crop up. I've not personally thought about it myself, so I'm going to be off the cuff here, which is probably the most honest way of being. I would just like to think that I've made a difference, and a positive difference. I am an activist, so I will put my head above the parapet and I will say things that aren't always well received, but they do come from a place of care and a place of understanding. Like, I tend to be able to see things that other people don't see. I can see the water we all swim in, and I can see how it can be problematic. And so I hope that by doing some of that starts to shift in whatever way. It's like the ripple effect. You don't know what ripple you're having, but hopefully there's something positive.
Oh, absolutely. And I think everything you're doing and everything you're aspiring to do, I think is incredible. So I'm very privileged to know you. Thank you for being on the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
Gosh, just thank you, Jodie. Thank you for everything you're doing. It's been really wonderful getting to know you over the last few years and your experiences, and this podcast show elevating other people's voices. And I think that's something we can all do, is elevate the voices of others.
Well, thank you so much. I'll put your contact details in the show notes if anybody wishes to contact you. But yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my latest podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links are in the show notes. Or you can contact me on jodie@jodiefraser.com. For more content and updates, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favourite platforms. Thank you once again for listening. Until next time, take care.